They called it a controlled descent. It wasn't. The bird went down over black ice and tundra, the rotors carving light through snow until the horizon folded in on itself. She remembered the sound first. Not the crash, but the silence that followed. Smoke. Cold metal. The hiss of fuel freezing faster than it burned. She moved because her body remembered what training never taught. Stay low. Breathe shallow. Count heartbeats until the world stops spinning. When she crawled from the wreck, the wind took her name before she could say it. Survival wasn't instinct. It was choice quiet, deliberate, merciless. If you've ever felt that kind of silence, subscribe. Tell me where you're watching from. Because this wasn't about falling. It was about refusing to stay down. 500 hours. The Arctic stillness presses against the lights of Camp Kodiak. Alaska, a pocket of movement inside a world of ice. Floodlights cut through the dark, spilling over lines of Marines standing in formation. Breath rises in pale clouds, the only motion in a scene otherwise sculpted from frost and discipline. The sound is minimal. The crunch of boots, a whistle carried thin by the wind, the low hum of a generator. Every surface reflects cold authority. Steel, ice, silence. From above, it looks choreographed. Rows of bodies, rigid in symmetry, braced against wind and routine. Beneath the precision, there's something quieter, a pulse of unease, carried not by sound, but by the collective awareness of being watched. Captain Mara Ellison stands at the edge of the yard, still and centered. Her uniform carries no excess, no rank embellishment, no visible insignia beyond what regulation requires. The frost clings to the edge of her cap. She does not brush it away. Her posture is unshakable. Her hands clasped behind her back. The wind moves around her, not through her. The officers assembled nearby speak in low tones, their voices muffled under the layered air. A few glances cut toward her, careful, but assessing. Her presence alters the rhythm of the morning, not loudly, but inevitably. She's an evaluator, sent from headquarters, a single line in the day's operation order. Yet, somehow, her silence carries more authority than the colonel's voice over the radio. The Marines shift in formation, waiting for instruction. No one speaks directly to her, but everyone feels the pull of her observation. Even the wind seems to hesitate when she moves. The camera of the mind glides closer, the fur of her collar rimed with ice, her breath invisible in the crosswind. Her eyes trace each formation, not with judgment, but precision. She measures timing, spacing, readiness. Each movement she observes is a reflection of discipline, but also of ego, the subtle pride of men accustomed to hierarchy unchallenged. Inside the command tent, tension holds its own shape. The officer's tone carries the stiffness of men explaining procedures to someone they don't expect to understand. She listens without interruption. When they finish, she gives no reaction, no note, no nod. The silence stretches. It's not defiance, but the discipline of someone who doesn't need to prove authority. That silence, more than any word, begins to divide the room. The younger officers exchange glances. One taps a pen against the clipboard, a small rebellion. Another checks the time, loud enough to make a point. These gestures, slight, almost invisible, become acts of resistance against quiet command. But Ellison remains motionless, absorbing their restlessness as if it were part of the landscape. Outside, the cold deepens. The horizon begins to gray with the promise of dawn. The floodlights flicker across the snow, catching the insignia on her sleeve, a subdued trident stitched in frost-gray thread. It's the only mark of identity visible, and even that feels less like a decoration than a secret. The Marines resume drills. Their movement is efficient, loud against the silence she leaves behind. Her eyes follow every rotation, every shout, every lapse in precision. She doesn't write. She doesn't correct. She observes. The officer's confidence falters beneath that kind of stillness, not the judgmental eye of authority, but the weight of composure itself. Wind tears across the yard, biting at faces and fingers. The recruits endure it without flinching. Somewhere in that shared cold, the question begins to form among them. Who is she? The answer, unspoken, hides in her restraint. She is the test they haven't been briefed on, the measure they don't yet understand. By 600 hours, the light has begun to change. The first line of sunlight edges across the camp, catching in the ice crystals that coat the antenna masts. Ellison steps forward through the snow, the rhythm of her boots precise and deliberate. The Marines stiffen instinctively, an unconscious salute to order. She pauses at the boundary line where formation meets command, where noise meets quiet and stops. For a long moment, she simply stands there, her shadow cutting across the frost. The cold wind carries the faint metallic scent of fuel and iron. Her gaze lingers on the officers' silhouettes framed by the morning light. There is no spoken challenge, no correction, no confrontation, only stillness. The silence feels heavy enough to hold meaning, as if she has said something none of them are ready to hear. In that frozen air, her restraint becomes presence. Her presence becomes power. The commander calls for assembly, voice clipped and formal. The men respond in unison. Ellison doesn't move, doesn't speak. The officers, for the first time, glance toward her, not with curiosity but with calculation, the early awareness of a test they didn't anticipate. As the wind rises again, the lights dim in the spreading daylight. The camera widens, showing the camp swallowed by snow and scale a small island of human order pressed against the indifferent Arctic expanse. Captain Mara Ellison remains still, her breath steady, her silence louder than command. The test has not yet begun, but they all feel it coming. The morning breaks harder than before. The light is brittle, scattered across a field of white that never softens. Wind lashes over the ice like a weapon, flattening sound and thought alike. Camp Kodiak stands in its still rhythm, Marines moving in precise lines, engines warming in the cold, voices clipped and formal. Yet beneath the order, something unspoken simmers. Captain Mara Ellison stands near the edge of the training yard again, unshielded against the gusts. The temperature has dropped overnight, the kind of cold that steals heat through every seam, the kind that finds the space between breath and bone. She doesn't move, doesn't seek warmth. Her composure reads as indifference, but among the officers, it has begun to take on another name: arrogance. They've watched her for 2 days now. No corrections, no commands, only observation. Each note she writes feels like a quiet judgment against them, even though none have seen her notebook. They fill the silence with speculation, convincing themselves that stillness is weakness, that no one can know leadership without noise. By 800 hours, the exercise begins, a cold weather endurance drill, standard procedure. The recruits are briefed, gear issued, and orders passed down through the chain. But beneath the surface of routine, another plan unfolds. The senior training officer, a man accustomed to control, proposes a demonstration for the evaluator. His tone is clipped, professional. The others nod. A bucket of water sits near the supply tent, used for equipment checks, or so it appears. The temperature hovers below freezing, the liquid more ice than fluid. Ellison stands at the center of the yard now, observing the drill's setup. Around her, motion continues in rhythm, rifles checked, sleds loaded, recruits bracing for movement. The officers' formation tightens subtly, not to perform, but to surround. The act is planned to look instructional, procedural, almost harmless. The cameras won't see intent, only execution. The order is given. 2 officers step forward, lifting the bucket under the guise of demonstration. They speak to the recruits about resilience, about shock, about staying functional under duress. The men nod, listening. The tone is clipped, military, practiced. No one looks at her directly. Then, without warning, the arc of the bucket swings. A cascade of ice and water cuts through the air, glinting like shattered glass in the floodlight. It hits her squarely across the shoulders, a freezing impact that cracks the breath from the air. The sound is brutal in its simplicity. Water meeting fabric. Then silence. For a second, even the wind seems to stop. The officers step back, pretending detachment, but the tension in their eyes betrays anticipation. Laughter breaks somewhere behind the formation. Sharp, nervous, searching for permission. It grows, uneven at first, then stronger, feeding on its own momentum. The sound is brittle against the cold, the kind of laughter that feels like defense, not joy. Ellison doesn't move. The water clings to her uniform, instantly freezing in place. Crystals form along the edge of her sleeve, locking into the fabric. Her hair darkens under the frost. A single thread of ice running down her collar. She doesn't flinch, doesn't reach up, doesn't break the rhythm of her breathing. The laughter falters, one by one. The faces shift from amusement to discomfort, from superiority to confusion. What they expected was reaction anger, protest, humiliation. What they receive is silence, absolute and unbroken. Her stillness begins to distort the meaning of what just happened. The cold, instead of punishing her, seems to serve her. Each second stretches longer, the silence heavier. The wind rises again, carrying the faint metallic crackle of freezing cloth. She stands rooted in the snow, eyes forward, expression unchanged. The officers shift their weight, unsure whether to retreat or continue. The recruits avert their eyes. The sound of the wind fills the space where laughter once was. It feels like judgment not from her, but from the air itself. Her endurance becomes the moment's center of gravity. No reprimand could have carried this much weight. No verbal correction could have silenced a crowd faster. When she finally moves, it's not to shake the ice away but to resume her walk. Each step leaves a print edged in frost, perfect and deliberate. Her posture hasn't changed. The bucket lies discarded in the snow, half frozen, the water inside it crystallizing under the light. The officers watch her go, their confidence evaporating in the cold they thought belonged to them. The recruits stand still, uncertain what they've witnessed, whether it was defiance or discipline, or something deeper. In the command tent, someone mutters about the cold, about the risk of frostbite, but no one calls her back. No one apologizes. No one dares to speak first. Outside, the wind moves through the compound again, a low, unending hum that sounds like a question without an answer. The cold has found its way through every layer of clothing, through every gesture of superiority. It has turned silence into something unassailable. By 900 hours. The training resumes. Orders are given with less confidence, voices pitched lower. The men look toward her as they pass, unsure of the line between observer and symbol. The moment has shifted something unspoken, the balance of respect, the definition of strength. Captain Mara Ellison stands again at the perimeter, frost still gleaming on her shoulders. The cold has become her ally now, shaping the air around her into something almost sacred. Her silence, once mistaken for weakness, now hangs like a mirror, forcing every man who looks at her to see what he brought into the cold. The Arctic doesn't take sides. It only reveals who belongs in its silence. The cold holds its breath. The training yard stands frozen not by weather, but by anticipation. Every eye on Camp Kodiak is fixed on Captain Mara Ellison. The ice still clings to her uniform like armor, catching the faint light of morning. Around her, silence stretches so long it begins to sound like pressure. No one moves. No one speaks. The men who humiliated her moments before wait for retaliation or confirmation that she won't respond at all. She moves. Not fast. Not angry. Deliberate. One hand rises, gloved fingers brushing frost from her collar. Then she removes her gloves with precise, slow motions. The The sound of leather pulling against skin breaks the quiet. Her hands are pale, reddened from cold, but steady. She sets the gloves down neatly on the railing beside her. The officers tense, the kind of tension that comes before consequence. She takes a single step forward. The snow crunches beneath her boot, sharp and final. The officers straighten, instinctively bracing, their postures hardening into something performative defensiveness, masked as readiness. They expect anger. They expect command. What they get is discipline refined into movement. Without warning, Ellison's right hand pivots upward, a wrist redirected, an elbow guided, a center of gravity undone. The first officer hits the ice before the others understand what they've seen. There's no impact sound, only a short exhale as air leaves his lungs. She doesn't look down. The next man steps in reflex, not decision. Her body turns slightly, catching his motion with calculated timing. She doesn't fight him. She lets his force carry through, using his own momentum against him. He's airborne for half a heartbeat before he meets the ground, snow exploding around him like powder. It happens again and again. Each movement is a lesson, not a strike. Her technique is stripped of aggression, pure, functional, exact, no wasted energy, no unnecessary violence. It's a language of control, taught through silence. The recruits watch, unblinking. The soundscape narrows, boots scuffing ice, breath catching, the rhythm of control measured by contact and restraint. No grunts, no shouting, just breath and motion. Her precision dismantles not just bodies but assumptions. The men realize too late that they are no longer testing her. She is teaching them. The fourth officer charges, frustration breaking discipline. He's heavier, faster, but momentum means nothing against control. Ellison shifts her stance, intercepts his arm mid-swing, and redirects his weight with one motion. He crashes to the ground beside the others, stunned but unharmed. Her movements stop as suddenly as they began. 4 men down, no noise, no visible emotion. Only the sound of wind pressing through the antenna masts and the slow return of collective breathing. She looks at no one directly. Her expression remains neutral, professional, detached, even compassionate. She doesn't gloat or linger on the fallen men. She adjusts her posture, resets her footing, and stands at attention. The action is so ordinary it feels almost ceremonial. The silence that follows is different now. Not the awkward void of before, but reverence raw and unspoken. The recruits, still lined in formation, don't dare shift their gaze. Their understanding shifts in real time. What began as humiliation has become instruction. What began as a test has become revelation. Even the air seems to change, less wind, more gravity. The snow falls softer. The senior officer rises slowly, his breath fogging in the air. He doesn't reach for her or speak. He only looks the kind of look that recognizes something irreversible. Command doesn't live in rank or tone. It lives in composure under pressure. Ellison surveys the yard once more. The bucket of ice remains overturned, its contents frozen into the ground. The scene has rearranged itself not through power, but through balance restored. She bends slightly, picks up her gloves, and slides them back on. Every movement, deliberate, precise. The recruits part for her without instruction. A natural formation born not from fear but respect. She walks past the fallen officers without acknowledgement. They are not enemies. They are witnesses. The camera lingers on the detail of her sleeve, the frost still clinging. The gray trident insignia half buried in ice. The symbol catches a blade of light, refracting it into something almost sacred. The yard is utterly silent now. The recruits begin to move again, slowly, instinctively falling into formation. No order is given, no voice raised. The chain of command has redefined itself without words. Ellison stops at the center of the yard, turns toward them, and stands at parade rest. The wind eases, the snow settles, and in that stillness, the message is clear. Strength isn't proven in reaction, it's revealed in control. The camera pulls back, the Arctic landscape swallowing the moment in light and distance. Her silence remains not the absence of sound, but the presence of mastery. The Arctic wind returns before the voices do. It rolls through the compound like a tide, bending the flag against its pole and scattering loose frost across the training yard. The men remain where they stood, silent, unmoving, the echoes of what happened still suspended in the air. Captain Mara Ellison stands at the center of it all, the cold biting through her uniform, the trident on her sleeve still rimmed in ice. The commander arrives just after 0930 hours. His vehicle cuts across the frozen lot, tires grinding against compacted snow. The door opens, and with it, a hush deeper than silence descends. The recruits straighten instinctively, boots aligned, eyes front. The officers who had tested her are still gathering themselves, their movements slow, as though afraid to break the stillness that has settled. He walks into the scene with the deliberate calm of a man who's seen more chaos than most shoulders squared, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his cover. The air carries the authority of rank long before his voice does. He pauses at the edge of the formation, scanning the yard. The overturned bucket glints in the snow beside the prints of bodies that had fallen. Ellison stands motionless, posture immaculate, gaze steady. The frost along her collar hasn't melted. The commander takes it in the quiet aftermath, the subtle disorder, the unmistakable shift in atmosphere. He doesn't speak. His expression hardens not in anger, but in comprehension. He looks from the officers to the recruits, then finally to her. What he sees isn't defiance. It's command restored through presence alone. He steps closer. The snow underfoot compresses with a muted crunch, deliberate, paced. Every eye follows him. The wind hums low through the radio tower cables. When he stops before her, the air seems to contract. The moment holds. He doesn't ask what happened. He doesn't need to. The truth is already there, written in posture, silence, and the balance of the yard itself. Her left glove rests against her side. Beneath the edge of the cuff, the fabric has torn slightly, exposing a pale scar that curves just above the wrist, the unmistakable mark of a trident burn, a symbol used in specialized Marine training programs decades prior. Few still bear it. Fewer still created it. Recognition flickers across his expression, the kind that comes not from rumor, but from memory. The air between them sharpens not with tension, but realization. He exhales, slow and measured, the sound almost lost in the wind. Then he straightens, a subtle shift, not deference, but respect returned. The truth unfolds through silence. Captain Mara Ellison was not sent here to evaluate. She was the architect of the very program they practiced, the doctrine they recited, the discipline they tried to measure her by. Her name existed in training manuals, stripped of identity, preserved only in initials and instruction. The Marines had spent years memorizing her methods, never realizing the author was the woman now standing before them. The officers who had mocked her lower their eyes, not out of fear, out of recognition, the kind that humbles more than punishment ever could. Their arrogance drains quietly into the snow, leaving only the sound of their own breathing. The commander turns slightly, surveying his men. He doesn't reprimand them. He doesn't need to. The weight of the moment has already done the work. Ellison gives no reaction. She remains composed, hands clasped, gaze fixed on the horizon beyond the yard, the faint ridge where ice meets sky. The wind lifts her collar, brushes her hair against her cheek, and carries with it the kind of stillness that feels earned. The commander finally nods once the smallest gesture, but it shifts the entire mood of the yard. The officers straighten, subdued. The recruits follow, aligning their boots and restoring formation. The structure rebuilds itself, not through command but through understanding. He steps back, giving her the space of acknowledgement without ceremony. Rank no longer defines the moment, respect does. For a long time, no one moves. The flag ripples once, the ice groans under pressure, and the compound breathes as one. The humiliation that began in cruelty now dissolves into reverence. The men see her differently, not as an intruder, not as a test, but as a mirror. The wind shifts again, softer this time, brushing across the snow like a closing gesture. In that movement lies the quiet lesson she came to teach, that strength measured in silence endures longer than authority spoken aloud. The commander turns toward the horizon. She remains still. The recruits, unsure whether to salute or simply stand in acknowledgement, choose the latter. The choice feels right. No words follow. The truth doesn't need translation. As the light strengthens across Camp Kodiak, the frost on her sleeve begins to melt. Droplets trace down the stitched trident, glinting gold in the low sun before freezing again, the symbol preserved, the meaning renewed. The silence holds, not as punishment, not as judgment, but as respect. By 1000 hours, order is restored, though no command was issued. The training continues under the same rules, but the energy has changed, measured, unified, aware. In the cold, a new kind of warmth lingers. The story doesn't close with victory, only understanding. Captain Mara Ellison remains at the center of it, calm, composed, unshaken. The storm has passed, but its lesson remains carved into the ice. The wind has gentled by morning. It moves low across the snow, no longer cutting, only whispering. The horizon glows with the first pale warmth of dawn, a slow gold line edging the ridges beyond Camp Kodiak. Frost clings to the antennas, the vehicles. The railings soft now, no longer sharp. The yard stands in still formation, reshaped by what has already passed. No voice calls reveille, no whistle marks formation. Yet the recruits stand assembled, perfect lines drawn across the snow without order or command. Their breath rises in unison, vapor catching the sunrise like smoke from a steady flame. The rhythm of their discipline has changed, not forced, but chosen. Captain Mara Ellison stands apart, not at the head of the line, but beside it. Her stance is calm, centered, the stillness of someone who no longer needs to prove control. The light touches her shoulder, glinting against the faint sheen of ice that remains from the day before. Her trident insignia gleams in soft gold, no longer frozen, no longer hidden. Around her, the air carries a quiet humility. The officers from the previous morning move differently now, deliberate, measured, stripped of performance. Their pride, once brittle, has softened into something more durable: respect. The commander stands nearby, silent, his presence steady but unintrusive. Leadership, like the cold, feels clearer in its restraint. There is no spoken apology, no declaration. The acknowledgement exists in posture, in the way the men hold their gaze when she passes. Shame and pride coexist quietly in the air, twin weights that temper one another. No one looks away now. The exercise continues: slow drills, steady movements through the frost. The recruits move with precision, their boots pressing clean patterns into the snow. They are not performing for her anymore. They are reflecting her. Each step, each breath, mirrors the calm she carries. Ellison watches without judgment. Her gaze tracks the smallest things: alignment, focus, endurance, the invisible qualities that define a Marine when the noise is gone. The hum of a generator fills the distance. A flag ripples, not in defiance but in continuity. She steps forward once, adjusts a recruit's stance with a light tap on the shoulder. The touch is brief, instructional, wordless. The young Marine straightens, inhales deeply, steadies his weight. It is the smallest correction, but it carries the full gravity of the lesson. Learned here, control is not dominance. It is awareness. The sun continues to rise. Frost begins to loosen, turning to beads of light along the railing. Every glint seems to echo the same quiet truth that strength, at its highest form, leaves no bruise. Across the yard, the commander watches her. His hands remain clasped behind his back, but his eyes speak the kind of recognition that does not need to be voiced. She has restored something deeper than order. She has reminded them what discipline looks like when stripped of pride. The recruits begin cool-down drills, breathing in time with the cold. Their exhalations rise in rhythm, a soft white chorus fading into the air. In the stillness, the yard feels less like a place of trial and more like a place of reflection, a mirror for the men who had thought they understood endurance until they saw it lived in silence. The soundscape narrows boots in snow, the faint jingle of gear, the low rush of the wind between hangars. Time stretches. The compound feels suspended between night and day, between what was arrogance and what is understanding. Ellison walks the perimeter one final time. Her pace is even unhurried. The cold clings to her boots, but the light follows her now, lengthening her shadow across the ice. The recruits track her movement with quiet respect. They do not salute. They do not call out. Their silence is the salute. She stops near the flagpole. Frost crystals shimmer along the base, reflecting sunlight in shards of white and gold. For a moment, she looks outward beyond the compound, toward the endless horizon of snow and cloud. The wind rises briefly, catching the hem of her coat. It sounds almost like breath, steady, alive, unbroken. Her reflection glimmers faintly in the ice beneath her boots. The patch on her sleeve, the snowflake enclosed in a compass, catches the morning light. It is both symbol and summary fragility bound by direction, stillness shaped by control. The recruits hold their stance. The commander lowers his head slightly, the gesture quiet and sincere. Around them, the camp feels lighter, as if the cold itself has released its grip. No ceremony follows. No speech closes the moment. The lesson has already taken root, written not in words, but in breath, posture, and frost. As the sun crests fully over the ridge, gold floods the yard. Ice turns to water. Water turns to light. Captain Mara Ellison remains still, a silhouette framed against the dawn, unwavering in the wind. Because control, she's shown them, is not silence. It's knowing the storm cannot take what is already steady. What stays with you isn't the crash or the cold. It's the silence that followed, the kind that tests who you are when the noise is gone. She didn't break in that silence. She built herself there. Every breath after was earned, every step measured against the wind that once tried to erase her. Sometimes endurance isn't loud. It doesn't scream victory or demand recognition. It just holds steady, calm, alive. If you've ever stood in that kind of quiet, tell me what you learned from it. Drop a comment, subscribe, and keep your eyes open for the next story, because survival isn't luck, it's practice. Share this with someone who thinks control is about force. Remind them it's about stillness under fire. The ice has melted now, but the lesson remains: some storms don't pass, don't. You just learn to stand through them. Mission logged, debrief complete.